Your story is more powerful than you realize. I just come from a studio recording for a show that I was part of. I was part of a panel discussion with some very interesting panels on a show discussing a topic that maybe let me not go into, so not preempt the show. But there was a part that really struck out to me, man, which really has me thinking ever since I left the interview. There was a part where they were asking, a bunch of questions on how to tackle the challenges facing, a certain topic. And I was fortunate to be, with two other amazing panelists. And they were dealing with, the topic and were answering the question. They all gave very informative, very academic, very intelligent, I think, answers, especially the other two panelists. And the host was asking a number of interesting questions about what are the challenges that are faced with when it comes to, ministry and urban missions and, so on, all these things. And the questions and comments and the feedback that we're giving were very, very intellectual, if I can say. There was a part where he asked a question where he directed it, to us individually and said, what has been your story personally in line with this? And each of us almost off script gave our own stories. And it's almost like there was a part where as we share our stories, almost like kind of set up, because of just how captivating and how real the information we're sharing became, because it was applied now to a personal and real experience. And it just reminded me of something that I've really been thinking hard about, the past couple of days and weeks, is the importance and the power of an authentic and personal story. As people, we tend to undermine the experiences that we have and the stories that we have as individuals. In that each of us as different people have walked various journeys which no one else has walked. No one else has gone through your background. No one else might know the experiences that, even if they might come from a similar background in a similar, setting, even if from the same family, there are certain experiences which you have which no one else has, the combination of those experiences, and those come together to make up your story. And it just struck me, man, because there's a thought there that the information that we consume is more impactful when it's tied to a story, a real life story. Even if it's informational, even if it's academic, even if it's, theoretical, there's something about real world testimonies and stories that make something that was, any piece of information that would have been theoretical become more powerful and impactful in people, when they hear it, to say, oh, okay, not only is this information real, but it was real for this person's life and I can see what it's done for them. And there's this thing called the hero's journey, which is an aspect that features in every movie or in most movies, because movies take advantage of the power of stories. That if you look at the movies that you like or the movies that you've watched, the movies that you love, all of them are tied to a story. And the story has typically a similar structure, which when I think about is what was captivating about the stories I was listening to, and is what I think is captivating about stories in general. There's this typical structure of the stories. And the structure is like this. So there's a character, right, or a hero that's at the center of the heart of the story. And in this story, the character goes on a journey, right, or an adventure, whether it's to try and pursue a certain goal, whether it's to try and solve a particular problem, whether it's to try and achieve something, or whether it's trying to become something. There's a specific goal that the story's character has in mind, right? There's a specific thing that they're trying to pursue. And in their pursuit of that thing, they then face various challenges, right? They come up with obstacles, they come up with problems. So you've got your character and his setting, you've got the goal that he's pursuing, or the thing that he's trying to overcome, the mountain he's trying to climb, and then you've got the challenges that he faces. And what makes the story interesting is how this person faces the challenges and how he eventually, through the process of the story, eventually overcomes those challenges. And sometimes what makes the story captivating is the fact that when the story begins at the onset, it doesn't seem as though he will be able to overcome the story. And so that's what makes the story thrilling, is the fact that this person is going to face this, they're facing this challenge, they're going to overcome this, and are they going to overcome it or not? And that's what creates the suspense to say, is this person going to succeed or not in overcoming this challenge that they're facing? And throughout the story, they face the challenge, they overcome it. And at the end of the story, the power of the story is not just that they overcame the challenge, but the fact that in the process of overcoming the challenge, they experienced a transformation that made them evolve and become a better person. So I recently shared a story of when I was graduating. Facebook has this thing where it reminds you of things you might have posted years back. And I logged into my Facebook page a couple of days back, and it reminded me of a story I shared about my graduation, And when I looked back at it, man, I was like, yo, man, why did this story matter so much? It's because it borrowed the hero's journey, that an individual sets out on a particular goal, whether it's to study, to achieve a qualification or whatever, and you face inevitably certain challenges on the way that make you question whether or not you will succeed in achieving this thing. And you face certain trials, you face certain obstacles along the way, you face certain challenges, you meet different people who become characters in the story, supporting casts, if you will. And at the end of the journey, you then accomplish or climb the mountain and achieve the story or achieve the goal. And then at the end of that achievement, there's a transformation that has taken place in the accomplishment of the story, and that you've now qualified, or you become more skilled, or you become more experienced, or more enlightened, or ultimately a better person in some respect. The interesting thing about that story, or the hero's journey, is that it follows a cycle, right? It follows a cyclical pattern where the hero embarks on the journey, they face a challenge, they overcome the challenges that come with meeting the goal, they're transformed at the end of the journey. But that transformation, or that new person that they've become, now faces or meets new problems or new obstacles or new goal that they have to face. And so the journey then continues, that they have to face certain obstacles that come with achieving that goal. They then undertake those obstacles, they face and overcome them, and there's a suspense as to whether or not they will achieve it. And at the end, they then become a transformed person to then face new and renewed challenges and obstacles. Why does that matter is something that sparked from me in the conversations, that when we're sharing our stories, each of us shared a hero's journey in a specific line to say that this is how I overcame this specific problem that I was facing. And throughout life, we face a number of different challenges, small and great, and we don't realize that in the story, there's a value in it, because your story can benefit someone else. We go to the movies because we want to watch the stories. We read biographies. We read testimonials. We have a desire to absorb stories. And that's because we find value in stories. There's something about the human heart that just resonates with the story, because it somehow gives meaning to other people who might be on a similar story, or who might just be on their own journey, to say, oh, okay, that person faced an obstacle, I'm facing obstacles. That person overcame, that gives me hope that I can overcome. And that person experienced a transformation, and I'm looking forward to experiencing that kind of transformation myself, right? We resonate with stories. The challenge that comes with that is to realize that, man, we can reflect on our stories and actually see the value in them, and then share those stories, such that the story in itself can be a valuable asset, right? That someone else's story. I was watching a movie of the biography of the guy who invented the McDonald's company, right? I think his name is Ray Kroc, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a movie, but it's a movie documenting his life and how he was this business salesman. He was selling he was selling ice cream makers, and was going from store to store selling ice cream makers. Then he faced this obstacle of trying to, of not succeeding in selling those things in his journey, trying to accumulate wealth. And then he, bumped into these guys, the McDonald's brothers, who had this process, and he realized how he can franchise and systematize that, and eventually achieve success and became this huge conglomerate of the McDonald's company, right? It's a global brand. And there's a resonance with that, because he's faced obstacles similar to obstacles which I have faced or will face, or in the pursuit of a goal that I might be sharing or similar. But there is a power in his story such that his story alone was worth the movie. I was willing to spend the time to watch the movie because of his story alone. And your story is valuable, and so is mine. Our stories are valuable. But not only are the stories in themselves valuable, but the stories can be useful in convincing others of a value that you have to give, if that makes sense. So people that sell products and services and whatnot rely heavily on this thing called testimonials, right? Which is other people sharing the story of how they benefited from your product or your service. And whenever we've got something to share, something to give, the stories of how we arrived at that thing. I've got a story of how I wrote my first book. I've got a story of how, I produced certain, digital products or certain things. I've got a story of how I shared my first presentation or whatever. All of those stories are valuable in showing other people the value that we have to give or have to offer. And there are things that you might do or give which you think, no, it's just my own hobby, it's just my own dressmaking thing, it's just my own baking gig, it's just my own, But when someone actually understands the story of where did that actually come from, say you're this, you're a teacher, but for some reason you have this baking thing, what's the story behind that? There's a rich story, which then when the story is understood, people say, you know what, I might not be a big cake person, but I love your story so much that I'm willing to then, want a piece of those cakes. And so in that instance, the story is powerful to help a person see the value of something they have to give or have to offer. Without spending too much time on it, I just rather reflect on the power of stories, man, to say that we all have a story to give, and that story is powerful, it's valuable. There's a story. The story that I was sharing in the conversation was my conversion story and my experience with, with Christ and with walking with my faith. And the story in and of itself is valuable, and it's a message in and of itself. And we each have a story to tell in small ways, in significant ways. There's a problem that you might be facing now. There's an obstacle that you might be facing. See that as being your own personal movie, right? That you are in the story. I'm in the process with a brother of mine. We're trying to build something that we really think is going to be meaningful. We are in the hero's journey, that we're facing the obstacles of this goal that we're trying to achieve. And we are on that journey. We're on that hero's journey, facing obstacles. At the end, there's always a suspense of will they meet it, will they not, will they succeed, and will they not? And sometimes at the onset of the story, you don't have a certainty as to whether or not you will overcome the obstacles or whether you overcome the challenge. But that's what makes the journey worth it. To say at the end of it, I'll have a story. And even if you might not succeed in a specific line, the story is that you are always transformed at it. One of the people I was on the panel with today made a powerful comment when he was sharing his story of how he went, from unemployment, eventually started this ministry, and it's like now got global reach. And he made a powerful point where he was saying, never waste a crisis. Never waste a crisis, which was so powerful, because a crisis is nothing other than a critical point in the story, right? It's like a climax in the story, and it's a test to say, will you face it or will you be overcome by it? And in the process of facing it, in the process of just taking it head on, you then experience the journey of the story. It creates an adventure, and hopefully at the end, after overcoming and climbing that mountain, you'll have a story to tell and become a transformed person, ready to face new stories and new challenges. I just wanted to reflect on that idea of the power of stories, and hopefully it can be meaningful to you as well. Got stories to tell? Share your story, reflect on your story, enjoy the stories of others, and see the experiences you're facing as being on the hero's journey in creating a meaningful story at the end. Hope that will be valuable, and looking forward to catching up on the other side. Much love.